Good morning, everybody. Welcome to St. Lawrence's this morning on this Good Friday, one of the most solemn days of the Church's year. You should all have both a booklet for the service, for the 1 o'clock service, 2 o'clock service, but also you should have a sheet of photos of the Stations of the Cross. Can you all make sure you've got one, because you'll need it for what's going to happen now. There are lots of copies at the back if you don't have one, because we're going to follow that very closely. We're very fortunate here at St. Lawrence's in having this remarkable series of Stations of the Cross produced in the 1970s by a chap called Ian Collins, who was then artistic director of the Royal Shakespeare Company. And he produced this series of Stations of the Cross specifically for St. Lawrence's. He was a friend of the vicar of the time, I understand, and regularly came along to see the church. And we're very fortunate to have these extraordinary stations. They are unique. They're done specially for us. And everyone who visits the church considers that they're one of our jewels. So we're going to focus on them this morning for our Good Friday meditation. And to help us in this, so we can think about them at more than just the level of words, Ian Shaw, our wonderful organist this morning, is going to play a series of meditations written specifically on each of these pieces by Hugh Morgan, who was organist here some 10 years ago now, I suppose. Hugh was also inspired by these paintings and produced this remarkable series of meditations, each of which is based on one of these paintings. So the pattern will be, I will say some words of introduction. We'll then listen to Hugh's composition. Then after a moment of silence, we'll move on to the next one. Since it's quite long, I think it's probably best if people just stay seated. I know traditionally people sometimes wander around the church. But if you do that, you do block the view for other people. So I think it's probably easiest if you stay seated, look at such paintings directly as you can see easily, and the rest you'll have on the sheet in front of you to remind you of what they look like. And then, of course, at any time, you're very welcome to come and see the real thing in your own time and at your own speed. So let's begin. The first station of the cross. Jesus is condemned to death. These stations record Jesus' final journey to the cross, his last few hours of human life, and they compress into 14 pictures what must have been a very, very long day for him. And so we will travel through this journey almost hour by hour, if you like, on his way to the cross. So this painting is a simple portrait of Jesus against a light, textured background. The background is open, and it gives a sense of openness and of space, a suggestion of clouds. Jesus is still almost a free person. He's not yet been hemmed in by his destiny, by his imprisonment or whatever. And so you get this glorious sense of sky and open space behind him. His head occupies about half the picture. And here Jesus is a recognizable person. You'd know him if you met him on the bus, wouldn't you? It's a portrait. Slim-shouldered, not a powerful body. A simple tunic that he wears, gathered into folds. He's looking to one side. His eyes are averted. You sense that he's deep inside himself, steeling himself for what's about to happen. He's kind of going deep inside himself, mastering his resources. You know how people look like that, their eyes slightly averted, when they're working out what to say or drawing on their inner resources in order to face a challenge. That's how you feel with him. His eyes aren't really seeing. he's deep inside himself, summoning his energy and his courage. Like with us, when we're about to face a difficult challenge, taking a deep breath and steeling ourselves for what is going to happen. Standing up for what we believe, perhaps, despite all the pressures against us. You might think perhaps of a falsely accused person, or a prisoner of conscience, facing trial and judgment. So there's Jesus taking a deep breath, preparing himself for what's going to happen over the course of the day. The second station, Jesus receives the cross. So whereas before Jesus was 2/3 up the picture, here he's way down towards the bottom in the lower half. In the first picture, Jesus was clearly dominating the space. He was kind of in control of things. But here, it's the cross that takes up most of the space. It's huge. And it's crushing. Look at Jesus' puny fingers compared with the size of the cross that he's holding. I sometimes wonder whether the artist was inspired by the concrete beams with which our church is built. There's something almost concrete about it. You can feel its weight, almost as if it was a concrete cross, really, the way that he's painted it, weighing down on him. And whereas before the sky was interesting and cloudy and open, here the sky is washed out, just a sort of pale blue. Jesus is looking down. He's concentrating on getting the cross to where it needs to go, focused on the job. He can't really think of anything else. The weight of the cross is so heavy on his shoulders, he's got no space for anything except to concentrate step by step on getting the cross along the road. You know how it is when you're in pain and the detail just goes. It's just you and your pain. And the pain takes up most of our resources, and we haven't got much energy left to think about anything else. And when we're in pain with our limited energy, we focus on getting whatever job we need to do done. And that's kind of it. And here's Jesus, focused on carrying the cross, getting it a little further along the road. the third station, Jesus falls for the first time. It's interesting looking at the first three paintings. In the first, Jesus' head is 2/3 of the way up. Then it's further down, and here Jesus' head is sunk right down to the bottom of the frame, literally sinking under the burden. His puny fingers in the last station, which were clinging onto the cross, here have slipped away entirely. You can see the hand loose as the cross falls on top of him. The cross has changed colour here. It's no longer the concrete of the last picture. It's now definitely wood, and you can see the grain of the cross. The colour of the large cross we're bringing into church later this morning as part of our Good Friday liturgy, and which we'll be invited to venerate if we wish. It feels now like a real wooden cross falling onto him. Jesus slumping under the burden. It was too much to carry. He couldn't manage it. From time to time in all our lives, things seem to get out of control. We all have been through this experience, I'm sure, of being totally at the mercy of events, no longer able to control anything very much, sometimes feeling even as if we're on a kind of free fall, not sure what's happening to us, and certainly no longer able to muster the resources to take control of anything. We just have to endure. At times like this, it's helpful to be able to put our own experiences into a wider pattern. Others have been here before and survived. And that's one of the helpful things about these stations of the cross. It reminds us that when we too feel that life is out of control, when we're being crushed by the burdens of life, it's a reminder that that's all part of a human pattern, a pattern that God himself shared when he was born as a man. It's a pattern that takes up our own personal sufferings and puts them in a wider context. This is each of us here, slipping under the burdens of life, and yet knowing that many human beings have been through this, and most have found some sort of resurrection at the end. The fourth station, Jesus is met by his mother. Blessed moment of relief here, because the cross, which has dominated the last two pictures, is suddenly muted and fades a bit into the background. Jesus' face is screwed up. His spiky hair, reminiscent rather of the crown of thorns he wore earlier in the day, is very evident. Jesus' eyes are focused on Mary, his mother. His robe has now become a plain white sheet. And the image is paler than the pictures we've had so far. Here he is encountering another human being. Jesus isn't on his own. And the next few pictures have various other people keeping Jesus company. After the loneliness of the first three pictures, it's a relief when Jesus finally meets someone, even his mother. Unusually for these pictures, the cross is in 3D. You can just make out the side of the cross, just at the top of it there. And that means it seems almost to float a bit. Perhaps the cross feels lighter for Jesus now he's met his mother. Maybe it's given him a bit of fresh energy, meeting someone whom he loves. Mary's looking up at him, scrutinizing his face. Goodness knows what she's feeling, but she's putting her own feelings aside in order to assess the situation. It's the classic role for a carer, bracketing off one's own feelings in order to deal with the mess, in order to keep the relationship going. Anybody who's been a parent or a carer for anybody knows that look. You're not even trying to think about what you're feeling yourself. You're too busy assessing the situation, working out what can be done no matter what your own feelings are. You get on with the job in hand. Here is Mary, meeting her son, working out how best to bring him a moment of comfort, a moment of relief. The fifth station, the cross of Jesus laid upon Simon of Cyrene. So here, Jesus is joined by Simon of Cyrene. Someone physically comes to help him. Cyrene, where Simon is from, was in Africa, and Simon has darker skin as well as curly hair and a modern haircut. He's someone you might meet on the bus, again, a recognizable person. Simon is, in a sense, a normal person, in contrast to Jesus, who in this series is always rather stylized, painted somewhat artificially. But whereas Jesus sometimes looks a bit theatrical, Simon is us, ordinary people, coming to the help of someone who is struggling. We've all been there, and on both sides as well. We've all been there trying to support someone, probably someone we didn't know actually, who was having difficulties, offering them to carry their shopping for them, giving them a seat on the tube or the bus, helping them across the road maybe, or maybe being helped, maybe gratefully taking one's seat on the bus who's stood up for one, or something even more dramatic than that. We've been on both sides of this, both Jesus' side and Simon's side. The previous week, Jesus might well have been healing Simon. Today, it's Simon who's helping Jesus. There's a close physical proximity between the two, which the artist has really emphasized. You can feel Simon kind of brushing up against Jesus. Just reaching out to someone physically is often enough to help and to succor them. Jesus clearly helped by Simon's physical presence, even though with his eyes closed, he's hardly aware of him. So Jesus and Simon, united by the cross they're carrying. It's a shared burden. All human beings, if only we would admit it, are united by our common suffering. All human beings suffer. It's part of being born in flesh. Flesh feels pain. And all human beings, from time to time, feel pain, physical, psychological, one sort or another. If only we would admit it, human beings would find themselves united by an acknowledgement of their common suffering, the fact we all suffer. Instead, so often we deal with it by denying our own pain and imposing it on others instead. Inflicting our own pain on other people in order to make ourselves feel better. Bullying them, persecuting them, making offensive language against them, showing intolerance against them. And all the time we're trying to deny our own pain, our own vulnerability. If only we could accept that and confess it, we would find ourselves united with all our brothers and sisters everywhere. the sixth station. Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. So here's Veronica. We don't know who she is, offering Jesus a damp cloth. Her black veil that she's wearing contrasts with the whiteness of the towel which she's offering Jesus. Look at the tender fingers of her right hand as she holds the cloth against Jesus' face. They're gentle, soft, in contrast to what Jesus is going through. And Jesus is grateful for the coolness of the cloth. I'm sure it must have been a damp towel, probably. It's like the towel they bring you at the end of a long flight. It's lovely, kind of wiping one's face with the lovely warm towel they bring you when you've been on a long international flight. And you can see Jesus here sinking into the coolness of the cloth, experiencing a very brief moment of oblivion, a brief moment of respite on his journey to the cross. How important those small touches are that we can offer people from time to time. Just a moment of release, a touch of luxury. Whether it's a kind word, or maybe it's an unexpected gift. We just are prompted to give someone a present, just to cheer them up for a moment. Maybe it's just a flower, or gift of flowers, or something like that, which somehow can brighten someone's life who's having a bad time, whose importance is out of all proportion to the value of the gift. Here, Veronica offers Jesus a moment of respite as she offers him this damp towel to cool his head in the heat of the day, no doubt with the sweat pouring down it. And gratefully, with his eyes closed, he acknowledges the gift which he's been given. the seventh station, Jesus falls for the second time. So here's Jesus now flat on the ground this time, his body ballooning out behind him. You can see where his back, behind his head, flat on the ground, a bit like a balloon. His hair is now ever so spiky, and the wood of the cross is very evident. The cross is huge and tactile. You can feel it. And it's very thinly painted, so you can feel the wooden frame on which the piece of wood on which the painting is painted. This is very much a wooden cross, very physical, very present, very heavy, cutting through. At times, again, we've all been here. Much of our life is spent in fantasy, in wishful thinking, in wondering about the future, regretting the past, thinking how things might have been, or thinking how they will be, making plans, or having fantasies about maybe winning the lottery or something nice happening. And at times life cuts across one's dreams with its heavy reality. This heavy reality can floor us because it interrupts our dreams and our fantasies and our hopes. We have to learn to accept the reality of a given situation, accepting maybe an illness, maybe bereavement, maybe a difficult fact of life, maybe a personal inadequacy. It cuts through the layers of fantasy we weave around our lives and those of others. It brings us back to reality. And if we're not careful, we stumble under that reality, as Jesus stumbles here, under the weight of the cross. The eighth station, Jesus is mourned by the women of Jerusalem. So the last few stations, except for the one where he falls under the cross, have featured other people. And here again, three different people meet Jesus, three women. Two are veiled, one is not. One is rather pretty, the one without the veil. And you wonder if that's meant to be Mary Magdalene, perhaps, meeting him on his final journey. Jesus' tunic has nearly disappeared now. He's kind of merging with the background. Only his face can be seen. A strong face, bearded, spiky hair, eyes closed, strong-featured. And yet he's surrounded here by 3 of his friends, presumably, reminding us that Jesus was part of a whole network of people. These 3 women represent what would have been hundreds, probably, of his friends, his contacts, people who knew him, people who supported him. Jesus is part of a whole network of people. He wasn't alone in that sense. None of us are actually alone. All of us have our networks, no matter who we are. Our family, our friends, our neighbours, members of our church, members of the organisations or societies we belong to, the shopkeepers, the people who do the checkout at Tesco or wherever we shop, who we get to know, the security man at our local Tesco here in Catford, who's in charge of the self-service machines, who knows pretty well, I think, the whole of Catford and has always got a friendly word for everybody. We're all part of great networks of people. The human faces are really all that are left in this picture. Everything else is pretty well greyed out. The background is greyed out. Jesus' tunic is kind of greyed out. We're just aware of the faces of the heads. And that's right. Because when all else fails, material things aren't that important at the end of the day. The only things that are important are our fellow human beings, the people who make up the networks to which we belong, the faces that we see, the people whom we greet, the eyes we look at and who look at us. In the last resort, that's what we have. The 9th station. Jesus falls for the 3rd time. This painting is all cross. Jesus is hardly visible, a shrinking figure somewhere behind the cross, partially hidden by it. In the battle between Jesus and the cross is winning. In fact, it's pretty well won. Jesus and his destiny. Jesus has lost all control now. His fate is taking over. Behind Jesus' head, it's gone dark. There seems to be a horizon about halfway up the picture. And behind Jesus' head, there's a kind of dark green colour. Maybe it's fields, maybe it's the green hill. Darkness awaits. And the materiality of the cross is winning. We know it will never finally win, but it's important to acknowledge this point, because again, in all our lives, despite our knowledge that material things are not so important, there comes a moment in everyone's life when matter seems to win, when the spirit somehow quails before material reality. And we wonder if religion, Christianity, our faith, our belief in some sort of spirituality is all a joke, a story, a myth. And actually, all that this world has to offer is the wood of the cross. The 10th station. Jesus is stripped of his garments. This picture is very different from the others we've seen so far. Jesus now stands vertical, erect, alone against a grey sky. Maybe there's a storm on the way. It's certainly ominous. His face is obscured, presumably by blood, I suppose. And yet it's curious, this, because look at Jesus' back, the way this painting shows him. It's strangely muscular, broad-shouldered, a strong back, good at carrying burdens, you might think. Now that Jesus is stripped of his garments, you can see his muscles, his flesh, rather a handsome body. What a waste of a life. Why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we throw away people's lives, kill them, persecute them, shoot them, make war against them, exploit them, make them diminish, waste them? Why do we human beings do this to each other? This rather fine body here might have lived to a great old age. Who knows? Might have had children, might have married, might have had a family. And instead, here he is, being wasted on his way to the crucifixion because some people couldn't stand what he said about God, his Father. The 11th station, Jesus is nailed to the cross. The last picture was very vertical, Jesus standing erect. This one is even more so. The artist has painted in vertical lines up and down, along with the grain of the wood on which he's painting. Which hand is it? Is it the back of the right hand or the front of the left, which is being nailed to the cross? It's difficult to see, although I think you can just make out nails, in which case it will be the back of the right hand. But just trying to work out which hand it is makes you think about the physicality of what's going on. That nail through the back of the hand or through the palm. In this series, there's no full crucifixion. This is the nearest we get to a crucifixion. And very often, less is more. A big crucifixion has all kinds of associations, many of which feel dated or a kind of escape into storytelling. Instead, we get one small detail, which rather suits the minimal feel of our church as well. And one picture, one small detail, is worth 1,000 words. It's so powerfully symbolic. This one hand nailed into one piece of wood. It's the only station in this series where Jesus' head doesn't appear. The nailed hand stands in for the whole body. It's better so, in a way, to let the imagination do the work. It's easier to imagine one small detail than be overwhelmed by the full bloodiness of a whole crucifixion. And this one small symbol is enough. It's a reminder that what we do here in church, Sunday by Sunday, is one small symbol of the salvation God offers to the whole world. A richness of meaning and of salvation, which our services here are like this nailed hand, one small symbol which summons up the powerful whole. When you too are being crucified, think of this image. The 12th station, Jesus dies on the cross. The last couple of pictures have been very vertical. This one, though, is horizontal. The grain of the wood goes across the painting and not up and down, which makes a huge difference. The verticality of the last couple of paintings made them feel very anxious, very tense. The horizontal lines here, though, make it feel relaxed, calm. Jesus is dissolving into death. The face is calm. We're no longer aware of the dark eyelids and the clenched eyebrows of the previous pictures. The eyes closed are now relaxed. The face is almost smiling. And at the bottom of the hairline, there are touches of what appears to be gold paint. The 13th station, the body of Jesus is taken down from the cross. So the ladder which they use to take the body of Jesus down frames his face between its rungs. And there are two hands. One holds the ladder, one supports Jesus' face. It's difficult to know if they belong to the same person or if there are two people here, one holding the ladder for the other, while he helps Jesus' body down from the cross. There's a blue sky now, and the ladders are strangely touching, strangely practical detail. You always get it in these stations of the cross. When Jesus is taken down from the cross, there's always a ladder, a strangely practical moment after all the other symbols that we've had. After Veronica's handkerchief, it's rather male in a way, rather practical, something a chap would do, really. Lending a ladder to, I'll help you get the body down. All our offerings are equally welcome, spiritual or physical. And in this painting, we see Jesus slowly descending down and down into death, from which he will emerge a short time later. The last station. the body of Jesus is laid in the sepulchre. So here's Jesus wrapped in his grave clothes, like the swaddling cloths of the manger, great stripes running across his body. He's between what appear to be curtains. Are these curtains closing on him, like the curtains at the creme, or are they about to open to reveal the new life that will shortly animate these features and open those eyes? It's difficult to tell. It could be either a goodbye, or maybe a future hello, or maybe both. The face is sculpted, kind of three-dimensional, the upper part of the picture. It's very similar to the first picture with which this whole series began. The face and the body occupy the same parts of the picture, the same sort of size. What a journey it's been from that first picture at the very beginning when Jesus is condemned to death to this picture of him now laid in the grave. And there's another ambiguity, because is Jesus lying down and we're looking at him on the floor of the tomb, or is he vertical, kind of rising from the dead, ready to enter the underworld where he will spend Holy Saturday, rising from the dead on Easter Day? Again, it's an ambivalence about this picture, which is very telling. It's both death and life. There are tinges of green about the painting if you look carefully. Again, difficult to know if it's the green of decay, of rotting, or whether it's the green of new life coming to birth. This picture stands between death and life, between crucifixion and resurrection. A sort of waiting picture, farewell and hello. A way that all of us living this life live our lives between those two moments of death and real life, of old life and new life. And whatever way of the cross we may have travelled in our own lives, whatever challenges lie before us, this journey which Christ undertook gives us hope and confidence that as we follow Jesus in his life, in his suffering and in his death, so we too will follow him in his resurrection as well. There is nothing life can throw at us that, following Jesus' example, we cannot survive and find resurrection at the end of. Although this is the last station, the 14th, there's really a 15th station, which is the cross in the Lady Chapel. And maybe on Easter Day, you might like to look at that with the same care. Jesus coming alive with all kinds of green imagery, leaves, and a sense of cheerful new life. Jesus dressed in yellow against the green background. It's a beautiful and powerful image of resurrection. But today, for now, we finish on this ambivalent picture of someone caught between death and new life as we await Jesus' resurrection on Easter Day and our own. There will now be a break until 2 o'clock when we begin the Liturgy of Good Friday. During this period of intermission, if you like, you're very welcome to wander around and examine the Stations of the Cross in more detail, maybe looking at some of the things that you noticed for the first time. The little notice is under some of them, but they seem to have gone. So you're very welcome just to wander around the church and, if you wish, or just stay quietly seated until 2 o'clock when we shall begin the main service of the day.